Yeah, I think.
All right, we're live.
For real?
Yeah, we're live. Let's roll.
Good. Hey, good morning. Welcome to the Apollo Challenge live broadcast here on YouTube. I'm Kyle Bracey, co-creator of the Apollo Challenge with Will Coffin, co-creator, and our co-host, Brett Bates.
How we doing?
All right, guys. Sorry, I'm still getting situated.
Is your video feed solid?
Yeah, I think we're good.
Satisfactory?
I think we're rolling. We're rolling.
Cool.
All right.
The world can see us.
We are going to be without Brett next week, so for all the big Brett Bates fans, I don't want you to show up to next week's episode disappointed because the man's heading to where?
I'm going to Germany and Scotland.
Nice.
Yeah. So I'll come back cultured, and we can talk more about the Apollo Challenge. But definitely sad I'm going to be missing next week, but I'm excited to do this because I'm going to be gone for a week and a half. And I wasn't my girlfriend, it's her, we're going to a wedding out in Germany. So
That's awesome. It's
Yeah.
gonna be a good time.
Yeah.
So this has been planned for a while.
Yeah, we've been saving up for it for quite some time, and then after 5 days in Germany, we're gonna head over to Scotland and go see what the Highlands are all about.
Excellent.
Yeah, so should be pretty good. Be pretty good.
Yeah. Cool.
All right, let's get started. So this week we're gonna be talking about nutrients, vitamins, and what really makes up the Apollo Challenge from the ground up as far as what we're putting in our bodies. So kind of just talking about the organic nature of food and what we want to be purchasing when we're going on the challenge, and overall what's the best ways to live a healthier lifestyle in the foods that you purchase on a regular basis from the grocery store.
So are we talking about organic foods or the organic nature of foods?
I was trying to just grasp for words, and that just came out. I thought it sounded good.
We'll talk about the organic nature of foods and
you make
organic
anything
foods.
sound good, my man. All right, so
Okay, so I think it's fair to say that most people understand to buy organic is good. But is that really just a marketing technique? What is really the benefit of eating organic?
yeah. So I think the first idea to drive home is that you're trying to limit your environmental toxins, and organic is one step closer to limiting that. I'd be remiss to say that, when you're buying organic, that you're buying, a food that's pure and void of any toxins, but that's just simply not the case. We don't live in that kind of world. And so, that being said, one of the things that Will and I really promote is taking a step further and finding the source of your food and what their practices are. So whether it be the greens that you're purchasing or the meat that you're purchasing, have an idea where it's being produced and the effort that's been made to get it to your table. And when doing that, you're going to uncover some of the concerns that you may have about your food.
So
Will chime
yeah,
in.
I mean, one of the best ways to start is, that sounds like a huge task if I'm someone who's just used to going to the grocery store.
Right.
And I have no idea where these foods come from. So one of the easiest ways to get going on that is just going to a farmer's market. Go to your local farmer's market, talk to the vendors. It's amazing how many organic vendors there are that are having organic greens, and then the ranchers will come out with their grass-fed, pasture-raised meats, and they love to talk about it, their product. So just ask them.
Well, it's their life.
Yeah,
they're putting all their effort and practice into bringing that to you, so those things matter.
Yep.
So to piggyback off of what Will said there, if you're buying it from the store, Google is a great source. You can look up whatever brand of greens you're purchasing and find out a little bit more about their practices, and maybe they're too big and they got too much going on to really get the details on that. And then maybe you have an opportunity to research a little bit more and find other options. So,
do you guys have either one of you have a preference as far as a sourced food locally here in the Chicagoland area that you like to go to, or anything like that?
Yeah, so for me and my wife, we enjoy going over to local foods and picking up our greens and meats there. It's locally sourced, and they do a great job of vetting the product before it comes in their store, and there's a inherent trust when you go in there. And then for me, when I was living in Texas, I was really a benefactor of an awesome hydroponic system. So at the ranch where I was teaching and coaching, the funny thing was is they had this elaborate greenhouse where they were producing all this incredible food, and the law of the state precluded them from actually serving the kids that food because it didn't meet certain process criteria effectively, right? And so somebody had to eat it, all right? And my appetite is big enough, so I would have just bags of greens that I had to go through on a weekly basis. And I probably never felt better, you know.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it was pretty incredible.
When you mentioned hydroponics, I thought you were going a completely different direction with that.
Yeah, I mean, Chicago, hydroponics in Chicago is interesting though. On greens, there's a lot of local companies that are starting to do hydroponics in the city, and that's not just limited to Chicago. That's across the nation. You know, there are companies that are doing like rooftop hydroponic systems and then selling that into Whole Foods. So I'm trying to remember if it's Gotham Greens. There's some groups in Chicago that sell. You can straight directly into the local Whole Foods where you can see this was grown on the roof of this building. Little bit away.
Cool.
So it's super local. Coming from an urban place, you got to think about air pollution, all that stuff. And so we're talking to them and making sure that they have all the proper controls in place. And hydroponics are indoors, so you can deal with air filtration, all that stuff. But I mean, as far as like sourcing food, so Kyle talked about local foods. I'm a creature of habit and convenience, like most people, and so. For me, it's my places are Whole Foods and Trader Joe's. They're major chains you can find in most cities, and talk to your butcher at Whole Foods and ask for the grass-fed beef and ask where it's from. And more and more stores have it now and have good quality foods. Whole Foods has a great system because they actually have their animal welfare rating. And that's about the best on a national scale. It's about the best you can go by right now. Is using Whole Foods kind of animal welfare scale, and you want that 4 or 5 level. 5 is really hard to find, but 4 or 5 typically for beef. 4 is grass fed, pasture raised. For chicken, that's free range. So able to roam. I'm not sure that it's specifically pasture raised on the chicken side. But 5 is definitely, it's just really hard to find.
So basically, the higher you are on that scale, the more humane these animals are treated.
Right. The closer to the way, and I like to think of it, the closer to the way that they would have been raised in nature by themselves.
Okay.
The closest to their natural environment versus being confined and stuffed full of grains. That's kind of the opposite, the other extreme. So as close to, being exposed to sunshine, being exposed, allowing to graze on whatever plants and shrubs are in the area, just a natural diet, a natural habitat, and that's going to create
it's going to increase the animal's nutrient density, and that's going to transfer into your ability to absorb from the animal itself, right? So the animal's going to eat greens, and they're going to absorb nutrients from those greens, and then you're going to be the benefactor through the meat as well. So all those are big considerations.
Yeah. Any pitfalls as far as the and I was alluding to this earlier, but essentially, anyone can call. Well, I don't know if it's anyone who can call something organic, but any pitfalls as far as that goes, like, or 100% natural, or
so that is definitely a pitfall. So organic is a specific system. So like there are standards that they have to follow in order to be able to be called organic by the USDA. All natural, that means nothing, right? That's essentially just a label you put on the outside. I don't believe there's anyone that regulates that sort of marketing, because everything eventually comes from nature. So it depends on how far back they're willing to
consider.
Consider that in their marketing.
Yeah, then you're dealing with an ethic issue, right? Not a mandate or a law.
Right. There are regulations for organic, and I think that's why not other than just the nutrient densities of organics. you at least know, generally speaking, that they're following better practices than conventional. Conventional, you run into all sorts of that's kind of, from my opinion, conventional is where the corporations of the world are experimenting with our food system. Like that's kind of like where we're trying to figure out, okay, how do we increase yields? And this is great from a philosophical stance because it allows us to feed more people. But from a person-to-person stance, we don't really know what the outcome is of those experiments until we have this giant, population-wide experiment that's going on. And so organic is going to be closer to the way that these plants would, like
grow
I said,
in
with
nature.
Yeah, exactly, the way they should be growing. They would naturally grow, and assuming you've got the local farmers are going to pay closer attention to their soil, and so they're going to be less likely, hopefully, or less likely to have just a monocrop. So you have diversity, and you have really nutrient-rich soil. So there's a lot of technical issue. There's a lot of reasons to go organic over conventional.
Sure.
It's a few bucks more, at the cash register, but it's just kind of.
Yeah, so I think that's where someone has to adopt the mindset of that food is your best medicine, and so making sure that you've got that switch in your mind that you can put a little extra towards your grocery budget, because the payoff will be greater for your health.
Yeah.
And don't misunderstand that just because the label has organic on it, that it is completely void of pesticides. Right. There are some pesticides that fall under the organic umbrella that allows those organic farmers to mitigate their crop loss due to insects or any other pests. So it hits home that point that you've got to really take ownership of finding out your source, and then two, understanding that hey, the world's full of toxins, and you have the ability to detoxify. That's why we were born with a liver, right? So. We're gonna the body prioritizes detoxification, so the liver is critical in that, and making sure that you're not placing any additional burden on it by what you're consuming is critical.
Very good.
One of the marketing misnomers is this organic versus conventional thing, because if it's not labeled organic in a store, it's usually labeled conventional. Well, conventional as a term makes you think, oh, that's the way conventional is like the traditional way, right? Which doesn't actually make any sense. Conventional, as labeled in the store, is maybe hearkening back to the way farming practices happened in like the 70s and 80s, which is when kind of you've got a lot more marketing push towards these organics, and you have to spread them to separate the two categories. But like conventional is a very specific snapshot of time, like is what it's referring to. So conventional as in like, the late 1900s, 100 years before that conventional system didn't exist. Right? Like 100 years before that, it was all organic.
Right.
So it is marketing. It's
when I think conventional, I think these huge farming rigs, and just again using essentially, and again maybe this is a bad way to put it, but using whatever methods or science you can to yield a higher crop.
Yeah.
And so essentially, any of the most advanced technology in regards to farming, and what's going to be eventually on your table.
Sure. So I think I can speak to this being a kid who grew up in a rural part of Illinois. That's one of the the county I grew up in will occasionally be the number one soybean producer in the country, actually maybe in the world. And so I grew up the son of a farm manager, and so very privy to the practices involved. And so there was a time when that was a very hard way to make a living.
Sure.
Just because of the corn prices and the soybean prices. And then obviously the way the world works is, when demand is high enough, then obviously in supply is lower, these individuals are able to capitalize a little bit. So what happened was there was the invention of Roundup, right? And so then they were able to modify the corn and then modify the soybeans. Now you have Roundup Ready corn and Roundup Ready beans. Okay, it makes for a real simple way to apply pesticide, and a really resistant crop. As those crops are engineered, they're resistant to droughts, they're resistant to the Roundup, so they're real durable, and consequently you have greater yields. And so those are favorable because those go to feed big livestock farms. Okay, well, if you take back and look at livestock farms, there's a whole host of environmental concerns from the gases produced there, and the farming practices. And so you really have to step back from it and understand that those fields that are abundant with the soybeans and the corn, those aren't the fields that are feeding you effectively, right? Those are feeding the livestock, and depending on whether or not you're buying mass-produced beef, that really doesn't involve you. So makes sense.
Yeah. I would say to our listener, if you're listening to this and this stuff interests you, check out a documentary called Food Inc. It's available on Netflix.
Oh yeah.
And they really do a good job of kind of exposing where our food comes from, in kind of the conventional sense. So it's a great, it's as always, it's great to understand where everything comes from. Where does your food come from? That's kind of where we started this conversation. So.
Well,
what's next?
We had mentioned, or you had mentioned it earlier, as far as the whole food scale, as far as the free range, the grass fed, and the wild caught, as far as fish goes. Can you extrapolate a little bit more on that? What does that mean as far as, fairly self-explanatory, but is there any factors to that somebody should be thinking about when purchasing food for their challenge or for their lifestyle?
Kyle, do you want to take beef? I'll take salmon.
Sure.
And we can rock, paper, scissors for chicken.
Yeah, so I'll just speak from personal level.
Generally,
Generally, if I was giving anyone advice, I would say, like Will said, go to your butcher, find out how where your cattle's coming from.
Yep.
Okay, your cattle is going to get a lot of nutrients from the greens that it eats, right? So that's why grass-fed is really beneficial. All right, I actually I purchase a half a beef to a full beef a year that I and my family will consume over the course of the year. So
Whole cow?
Yeah, and so. When that's split up with the
You love
food and
freezer
so
space.
forth, you do. I can tell you what, I can drive you right now to the pasture that it comes from. You know what I mean? So it's easy for me to feel good about what we're eating, and I'm telling you, it tastes so much better.
Well,
than
frankly,
what you buy at
I'm
the
just
farm.
pissed that you haven't shared any of this with me on the food level, because I would love to have it or try it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
Okay.
Well, we'll do that.
Derailed. Sorry.
No. But I mean,
Summer's coming up. We got some barbecues happening. I think.
Just that level of awareness, or when you taste something and it tastes really good. All right, where'd that come from?
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
and then going back and down and back. So, and this one, the farmer that I purchased this from will actually, his father had done a. He was really obsessive about how he fed the cattle, because he was getting it to taste a certain way. And so the grasses that it's on, and then he did a mixed diet where it was fed some grain for some marbling function. And so, that doesn't qualify as 100% grass fed, but I'm aware of where it's coming from, and how it's being produced. So I don't have any reservations over it, and the meat is absolutely outstanding. And when something tastes really good, what do? You don't hesitate to eat more of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so just create a relationship with your butcher, with your food source, and check. I mean, even the major chains, the non-Whole Foods have more grass-fed.
I hit beef. You've got you're up on the fish.
So yeah, so with the fish, the reason we want to go wild caught over farm raised is it, once again, the kind of thinking about the natural environment of the fish and the natural diet of the fish. Farm-raised fish are often confined in nets in water that is close to their natural habitat, but it's not by any means their natural habitat. They're stuck in nets, and often they're fed grain. And I can't think of a single fish that was naturally designed to consume grain, because it's like any feed. It's a cheap source of feed. It's a business. They have to calculate how much does it cost, how much money do I have to put into feed to feed these fish for them to grow to size before I can take them to market and then make a profit.
And you're making a profit off their weight,
right?
And the way to get them to weigh more is to eat more.
So that makes sense.
So wild caught is wild caught. They're caught in a stream, where their natural habitat is, or as the entrance in the ocean. If it's a big fish, salmon, and in a stream or lake.
And I'm gonna just chime in here because don't be convinced that just because it's wild caught that it isn't exposed to the same toxins, but it's not exposed to the same volume of toxins, right? If it's coming from the ocean, right, and it's not living next to 1,500 other fish in those nets. If it's offshore a little bit, it's going to be exposed to less toxins, right? So if you have these fish farms just offshore, you have runoff, right? City runoff, pollutants, and so that's where the toxins are at their most potent level before the water has been able to act as a solvent, if you may. And so it's just all of those things that you're really trying to pull back and mitigate, right? So
with fish, another thing to think about is where it lives in the food chain. So the fish that are higher up the food chain, so think big fish like tuna, because they eat smaller fish, which eat smaller fish, which eat smaller fish, and so all of the toxins, which the most commonly discussed one is mercury. Those get condensed. Those kind of get condensed in the larger fish because it's got this entire web,
spectrum,
of it's consumed. If you really look at the whole pyramid, it's consumed hundreds of thousands of smaller fish to condense into what it's got, and those heavy metals tend to hang around in the fat longer, so those big fish tend to collect it. So it's just and that's more of a moderation thing. It's like tuna's great, wild caught tuna's great for you, but don't have it every day. That's it's everything in moderation, but that's great. That's an option. Switch between, grab some grass-fed beef, get some pasture-raised chicken, have some wild-caught salmon, and throw in some tuna every now and again. Salmon is a pretty good one because it's kind of in the middle. It's not it's at the higher end of its food chain, but it's not a huge fish. It doesn't they don't live as long as a big tuna would. So.
And those streams are at elevation, you're at higher elevation, so you're not, you're not getting that trickle down effect. So it's just more favorable on top of all the nutrients that salmon has with the higher vitamin D levels or magnesium.
DHEA.
So that's why it's just a superior fish. That being said, right, we didn't touch on the farm raised salmon is not good at all, right? So getting wild caught salmon versus farm raised are two entirely different things. So
definitely just it's like it's a little more expensive, but invest in your health. I think it's worth it.
I'll tell you a good trick on that is to find a sale when it's because you'll find salmon priced pretty high, but then certain times of the year they'll do a drop because they're going to be in abundance and they're trying to get rid of it. So that's the time that you can freeze it,
stock up the freezer,
and stock it up for the year.
Absolutely.
So we've really capitalized on that. I think locally, it can range from $18 to $24, a pound during your normal periods of the year. And last year we found sale at Whole Foods where it was like $7.99 a pound, and so we just went heavy, filled up the freezer with it. So
there's speaking of farmers markets earlier, the one I recommend is in Logan Square. If you haven't been to it, I think it's one of the coolest, and my girlfriend and I do like to kind of check out the different farmers markets in the cities.
You never invited me.
All right. Well, we'll have to do that this summer, Kyle.
You invite me to that.
I got to cover something.
And I'll cook you a burger.
But they have it. I'm sure there's 100 different options out there, but there's always a guy there that is essentially like direct sale fish.
Oh,
From,
cool.
Wild caught Alaskan salmon, that type of thing.
Cool.
And I've always been tempted to try that out, but
Yeah,
That's
those
it.
people are out there, and you'll find those guys everywhere because someone's gonna see the market and want to be the conduit to sell it to you. So.
Sure.
who's got chicken? Rock, paper, scissors.
Here we go. One. All right, here we go.
Oh,
It's 3. It's on 3.
rock, paper, scissors,
One,
shoot.
1, 2.
All
All right, I got it. So, chickens. That's fun.
We just
All right,
learned-
so same farm, Texas. So I actually also benefited from an abundance of chickens, right? And so I would
It's a charitable organization.
happily go. So, and you have 20 chickens, right? You have some
Yeah.
bad actors among the bunch, and so I would be asked to come get rid of the bad actors, and they were causing too much trouble. And so, anyways, you'd have these chickens that had free range that were fed all kinds of vegetables because the mass-produced stuff
Sure.
that was left over, all this leftover food from the dining hall would be ideas slop. People
Yeah.
would consider slop. The chickens would eat it, right? So they enjoyed the vegetables.
Interesting.
And so, go to town on it, eat it.
Yeah.
And so I would go pick them up, harvest them, and so you wouldn't believe just the difference in the breast size of these chickens compared to what you can go get at the store. If you go to the store, you're going to find a really thick breast,
Yeah.
and you're not going to on the
It's just empty.
what's that?
It's just sorry.
Yeah, well, yeah, empty of nutrients,
Right,
but
right.
these are not near as thick. Okay,
Sure.
Bigger skeleton, right? But more time to mature. Not near as thick. Well, anyways, a much healthier bird. The idea in chicken farming practices is get them big as fast as possible and then get them to market as fast as possible. So there's a process there. I can't remember specifically how many days it is. It's right in somewhere in that 45-day range, and then there's another scale that you can hit to get more volume. And like Will had mentioned earlier, it's all about price per pound and then how much did it take to get your cost of goods to the market.
Yep.
So chicken's no different, but free range pasture raised chicken, free range organic chicken's the way to go.
Okay. Were you guys mentioning this? There was an accident. A semi went over in Wisconsin, and it was. I don't think I'm making this up, but just bear with me.
It's good thing this is a news show and we don't have to check our sources.
Then we would just be like everybody else. So.
Right. I heard fake news. Anyways, I could be wrong, but I heard that there was a truck that went over and it was filled with red Skittles, and they were actually on their way to somehow, I don't know, feed cattle to
Interesting.
fatten them up.
Huh.
So talking about weird practices.
Yeah, like I wouldn't be surprised what
Yeah.
anybody was going to try or experiment.
We
on.
haven't validated or verified
Yeah,
this source, so
Sorry, yeah.
so just to be clear.
I appreciate you throwing in that outlier, though.
Yeah, but well, I mean, I'm sure there's a ton of different examples out there how they
Was this a
fatten up cows.
semi full of red Skittles?
That's what the story said. All right, you know what? Maybe I'm making a fool out of myself right now.
No,
We'll double check.
Google it.
We'll come back on this next show whether this was true or not, or if whether or not you read this on the Onion, because Wisconsin
All right,
is
maybe it was the Onion.
Wisconsin.
I hope it wasn't.
That might be.
The state
Actually,
could have been
birthplace
wrong.
of the
The
Onion.
color of the Skittle could have been wrong.
So one, because this will go crazy. So one consideration that I'd like our audience to understand is that there's so much information out there regarding the quality of your food, the practices, and so forth. Is that take one step at a time, learn something about it. That way you're being proactive.
Yep.
Don't let it overbear you, because the other end of the spectrum is to just drive so much stress in your life because you're concerned about everything you eat, right? And then you enter the mind, and all this, the stress hormone cortisol comes into effect, and you can't even let go of that. So it's just taking a solid approach to it, do a little bit more research, and steady ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let's jump ahead to vitamins and supplements. So, what are some of the vitamins someone should be thinking about before the challenge, and conversely to that, during the challenge? And in other words, is there something that you should be doing above and beyond just your food to supplement some vitamins into your diet?
Yeah, I'll let Will lead on this. We talked on this before the podcast because this is a critical message that we want to get across.
Yeah, so vitamins, especially like multivitamins, think of them as kind of an insurance policy. It's not, people tell you don't need to take a multivitamin every day, and you probably don't, because they're designed, at least the good ones are designed to kind of supplement key nutrients that you would normally, that you might be deficient in based on a typical diet. So and without doing really comprehensive blood work, you're not going to know what nutrients and what vitamins you're deficient in. And there are tests. There are blood panels you can do that'll tell you how you're doing on every single vitamin. They're expensive, like $1,000 to get this work done, and so you need to work with a nutritionist to get this done. It's something that if you're really struggling with fatigue and some GI issues, and you should really work with a nutritionist to do some of these tests to figure out if maybe there's some imbalances going on. But generally speaking, if you have a diet, with organic whole foods, and high quality meats, high quality produce, there's a good chance with variety that you're going to cover all your bases.
Right.
So, that's why we focus on, the power salad is try and fill that middle part of your day with tons of nutrient dense foods. So you're getting that from your foods, because that's where our bodies, we're designed to get it from the breaking down foods. And, most people, the holistic kind of natural health communities will talk about, you should get everything from your foods. That's not always practical. So sometimes, but it's so hard to say that you need to take X, Y, and Z always, because not everyone does. Depends on the source, depends on the quality of your greens, the quality of your foods, as we just talked about. If you're buying your kale from a farmer whose soil has poor quality and is deficient in nutrient X, Y, and Z, then you're going to have less of that in your diet than the person who's buying it from farmer B, who's got more of it in their soil. And so it's very dynamic.
You could really go down the rabbit hole.
You really can. So that's a personal thing. If you want to find a good multivitamin as an insurance policy to make sure all your bases are covered. The only thing that I would say is if you're in a if you live somewhere where there's winter, where it's not sunny all the time, then you should definitely consider supplementing with vitamin D.
Yep.
That's just something that for me was a huge thing personally, as far as combating some of that kind of seasonal affective disorder, kind of that dip that naturally happens when the sun starts to get at a lower angle and you're not producing as much, vitamin D. But at the same time, if you're exposing your skin to the sun for 15 minutes a day in some capacity, then you're going to create on your own enough vitamin D to get through. So once again, it depends on how you want to get there naturally or with supplementation. But it's, vitamin D is not a bad thing to throw an extra 1,000 IUs in there.
Do you, as far as the multivitamins that you guys use, do you recommend any?
Yeah, so I don't want to get into brand recommendations. We can get into brand recommendations on another podcast, because that's diving down a whole other discussion. That being said, just like your foods, your multivitamins, you're gonna have multivitamins that are going to have the product that says it has on the label on the bottle, and then you're going to have others that are going to have fillers and just real lower quality as well. So you're going to have to vet your multivitamin just like you do your food. Okay, I think the to pull it back, you want to look at where the standard American diet lacks critical vitamins and nutrients, and so that's why it's so essential to get in those greens, and that's why we're really promoting that power salad. And you got to get out of that mindset of what I'm going to eat and how it's going to negatively affect me, and go into the mindset of how I eat and how it's going to positively affect me, right? And so getting that framework established, getting out of the purely macronutrient idea, right? Macro being what is the thermal value of the food, the calories involved, and how that's going to affect you, and more of what are the nutrient components of that food and how that's going to make me feel, right? So 500 calories at lunch are going to have two different consequences when they're served as a power salad versus a sandwich with processed meat, right? So you have two the same values, but totally different feelings afterwards, right?
Sure.
And you can't, unfortunately, that's not listed on the label. You can't look at the nutrition label and understand those values. You really have to understand the sourcing of the food, the quality of the product going into it, and talk to the people you're buying it from, talk to the people that are serving you. Restaurants that are focusing on the quality of their product are going to want to talk about the quality of their product. I mean, the chef who puts hours and hours and hours into selecting the finest produce to serve to his customers is probably gonna effervesce about how excited he was
if he's
talking
good.
to the good ones, effervesce about all of the relationship he has with his farmers or with his suppliers, and the quality of this food. And so just get someone talking, and you'll find that it becomes a very interesting conversation, and then you can feel more confident in where your food's coming from.
Yeah, absolutely.
So here's the challenge, all right? And so there's in sport and athletics, there's this peak that you want to hit when you're performing, where things are flowing and you're not even thinking about it, right?
Yep.
And so that's where you want to ascend to. We call that unconsciously conscious, okay? That means that you're not thinking about the things you're doing. It's so ingrained in you, right? And so there's 3 steps back at number 1, there's unconsciously unconscious. And I like to use this when we're talking about nutrition and diet, is to people not knowing how they're feeling just because they don't know any different, right? They just are going through the flow. And then there's consciously unconscious, all right? Now they're understanding to the point that I don't feel good, right? And so they get to that stage, okay? And then hopefully they make some modifications in their diet to where they become consciously conscious, right? Okay, I'm doing these things. I feel this way when I'm doing these things, all right?
Yep.
And that's a good thing, right? And then when they get to a point where it's just part of their lifestyle, okay, they don't know any different, right? You're getting up, you're eating the same things, and you just feel great all the time, okay? And then you have those days where you aren't consuming those things, and you're putting the garbage in your system, and maybe you feel it with joint aches, maybe you feel it with energy leaks, whatever, okay? And then you really start to place a lot of value in what you're eating. But if you never make those changes and you never get to that point to where you actually feel good because of the foods you're eating, you're performing at that high level, it's really hard to convince somebody, okay? So that's one of the biggest challenges. And so you probably after your first week or 2 on the challenge started realizing that for yourself, like, I didn't know I could feel this good by just changing the way I ate.
Yeah, and so you have to sit and you have to learn this information and then internalize it, and then it becomes part of your process, right? That's with anything.
Absolutely.
So we're talking a lot about and kind of reiterating a lot of points about the quality of your food, but you got to learn it first, and then implement it, and then it'll just be part of the way you shop. You won't have to think about selecting foods every time you go to the grocery store. You'll just know which ones to grab, and you'll shop the way it'll be the same automatic process that you've done forever. You'll just choose different foods because you'll know that they're better. So,
well, I wanted to ask you guys, so obviously when you were designing the challenge, you had these nutrients in mind, and obviously you realized that the salad and of course your hearty dinner, whatever you're going to be putting on your plate, high protein and high nutritional value of vegetables.
Yeah, all your meats and vegetables.
What was kind of the design process behind that when you're like, these are the foods that I want the people that are going to be on the challenge having, so that they get, potassium or that they get zinc, whatever the case may be?
Yeah. Good question. Great question. Magnesium, potassium, two the biggest nutrients that are lacked in the standard American diet, and so getting those in with your dark leafy greens, and that's why we want an abundance of that with the salads. Avocados are a superfood. Being able to add those to your diet on a daily basis, not only for the fat but for the high potassium and as well as their magnesium content. The foods or the meats that we selected, right? The salmon, high for vitamin D, also high in magnesium. The beef, B12 vitamins, iron. So those have really great profiles. You can add, build your own salad with your, you can add pumpkin seeds in there. I like to throw artichokes in mine. I'm trying to think off the top of my head what else Will likes to throw in his, but making it really robust. And so I had a buddy tell me over the weekend, he's got a couple kids that are ages, I believe, 8 and 6. And so they did he's been really healthy over the past year, made some really cool changes. And so getting his kids to understand, to kind of follow dad's lead, mom and dad's lead. They did a build your own salad day. So they had their island of food out there with probably 10 different dishes, and the kids had to go through and pick what they liked out of it. All of the 10 items were good. They're high quality.
Yeah, that's great.
And then the kids get to identify what they like,
That's
and
cool.
then you're just kind of getting that mindset in there,
Yeah.
And so everybody's a little unique on their flavor palette, right? But being creative makes it more fun. That's what you're trying to do, right? So
as far as the design, one of the other considerations was accessibility. Not only did we want to make sure that all of these food choices were optimized to get you, nutrient density for daily performance, cognitive performance, as well as body recomposition goals, but also accessibility, that you can find these foods in your local supermarket. You don't have to, it's not a specialty item that you have to, order direct from, overseas.
Yeah.
It's something that you can find locally, reliably. It can be a part of your daily routine, and the grocers are there to support you in this.
So the funny thing is that since we went the route with the Apollo Power Salad,
right.
and you can sit there and feel satiated and full after you eat a Apollo Power Salad, but it still falls under that switch in your mind where it's back like to those, I guess I'd call it 1980s, restricted diets where the salad was literally iceberg lettuce and maybe some slaw on there and whatever dressing was used with a very limited amount of processed meat.
It was probably a low-fat dressing, and it was probably just
cram full of
just
sugar.
trash.
And so when you weren't getting any,
fats are good, people. Fats are good.
You weren't getting any calories too. None of the food that you had were able to assist your daily energy producing functions. Which magnesium is really critical for. Which potassium is very critical for muscle action. So those are two of the big heavy hitters that we try to get across.
That's it as far as the questions I have with vitamins and supplements. The one thing we did kind of skip over was GMO. I suppose we can cover that another day. But if you guys wanted to touch on that really quick, but
I'll say that falls into some of the conventional farming stuff. That's technology used to try and increase yields, but it alters the natural environment.
Yep.
So that's kind of all I really want to talk about on that right now.
Yeah, we can wrap her up.
Let's wrap it up.
Cool. All right.
Gotta get some Skittles.
We got lots to talk about.
You got a Google search.
Yeah.
God, I hope I didn't dream that.
Just go straight to the onion and make sure it's not there.
The good news is that that you won't be back here next week to defend yourself either, so we can talk bad about you.
We're going to talk about it behind your back.
We'll just leave a nice big red Skittle right there
perfect,
for you.
Perfect. All right.
Maybe a pile of them for you.
Fat me up. Feed them to the cows.
All right, cool. Well, hey, guys, appreciate you listening, tuning in for the Apollo Challenge live broadcast, episode number 9. We will see you, Will and I will see you next Tuesday. Brett will be here the following week. For Brett Bates, for Will Coffin, I'm signing off.
Yep, just kind of normal stuff. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. That way you know when we go live, when we put new videos out. The book is available. Apollo Challenge, 28-day system to look amazing naked and be the smartest guy in the room. Available on Amazon right now. Just type in Apollo Challenge into the Amazon search bar and follow us on Instagram. Check out the website and make sure you post any questions you have about the program going through on Facebook. We are available for you.
Let me interrupt you real quick.
Yeah.
Can you get like a Twitter feed monitor on here? That way when Brett says something bogus like a semi-full of red Skittles, somebody can actually tweet us.
Just blow up the internet?
We can, but I don't know if we want to. I don't know if we want. We'll work on that. We'll play with some more formats. Maybe some, the YouTube live comments or something like that.
What's our mentions?
So, all right, guys. Well, thanks for tuning in, and we're out of here.
See ya.